Hi, welcome to Seeking the Kingdom of God channel. And today we are getting back into the teaching of radical giving. So today we are going to look at another uh, patriarch in the Bible. You could call him a patriarch, or you could call a particular personality in the Bible. And this personality is unusual in the sense that he was slated to die as a baby, but he got rescued by his enemies, and his enemies made sure that he was very well taken care of. Yeah. So, how did that happen? How can you expect your enemies to, instead of putting you in prison or some kind of a jail cell or some kind of a, uh, mm, some kind of a situation where you're going to perish. Instead of that, they take care of you. They take care of you with love. You're spoiled thoroughly. You're given the best of everything. So how does the enemy come into a position that he is doing God's will, right? That is going to be our focus today in radical giving. So if you are in a similar situation where you think you have got enemies who are after you to make sure that you perish, just give yourself to God, give yourself to His Son Jesus, and allow Him to be the Lord of your life. Allow Him to take care of you, and you will find that the enemies will have to bow down, and they will be actually making sure that you are blessed. How it happens, only He can manage that. So let's take a look. So in our teaching today, we are going to be looking at two chapters in the Bible, Exodus 1 and 2. So the context is that we have finished the book of Genesis. So in the book of Genesis, we came to a point where Joseph was able to feed his family in Canaan, and that incident progresses further, and his whole family moved to Egypt, which is where Joseph is the governor. So when they move to Egypt, they are given the choicest of lands to live in, and they prosper. They prosper in such a way that they become a huge nation inside Egypt. So, what is the outcome of that? What is the outcome of this, um, you know, uh, gargantuan growth of a family of 70 people into a nation? A nation is filled with millions of people. So that's what has happened to the family of Joseph. So let's see where they are. Once they become a nation, what happens to them? So we'll begin with Exodus 1 and read from verse 5. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, and Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew exceedingly mighty. They became powerful. The land was filled with these people, was filled with these Jews. Now there arose, after all this had happened, in verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So it had happened over a few generations. They had forgotten about Joseph. Even the Egyptians had forgotten about Joseph. And he said to his people, look, the children or the people of Israel are more mightier than we. They're more powerful than we are. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Shrewdly meaning let us deal cunningly with them. Let us manipulate them, lest they multiply, lest they continue to increase, and in the event of war, that they might join our enemies and fight against us, and so we may be ousted out of our own land. We don't want that. So we don't want them to join our enemies. So let's do something about this overwhelming, overshooting population of Israelites in the land of Egypt. Therefore, what happened? They set taskmasters, meaning slave drivers, over them, or slave drivers, taskmasters, meaning bosses who would put other people to work. over them to afflict them with their burdens, to make sure that they feel pained in about having to live in Egypt, so that their life would in Egypt would become miserable. So that was the task given to the taskmasters. So they were employed so that they could make the lives of the Israelites in Egypt miserable. And how did they do that? They were supposed to build for Pharaoh, the king, supply cities, cities for supply, Pithom and Ramesses. So that was the name of the two cities that the Israelites were expected to build. But what happened? But the more the taskmasters afflicted them, the more they made their lives miserable, the more the Israelites multiplied and grew. It was like as though it was having the opposite effect on them. The more they became miserable, the more they had more children, and they continued to grow. And they were in dread of the children of Israel. So now it was nothing that they did work. So it was like Egyptians were now dreading the Israelites. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor. So they increased the amount of work that they were expected to do. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage. So it was as though they had turned them from people and friends into slaves. So they made it very difficult for them to have a happy life, have a joyous life. They gave them hard labor to do. So throughout the day, they were in mortar, that is some kind of a binding material like cement. They were spending their life in making mortar, the glue that is needed for buildings, in making bricks, and in all manner of service in the field. So they were put to labor, hard labor. All their service in which they made them serve was with rigor. So there was no there was no uh, they couldn't use anything to become efficient, to make their labor more easy on them. No, the harder the labor they could make the labor, the better the Egyptians felt. So they thought they were going to put pressure on them to die. So the idea was the hard labor would make them wilt and die, wither and die, become weak and die. So apparently it wasn't working. It was doing the opposite. They became stronger, they bore more children, and they continued to grow as a nation. Then then they came to another plan. The king of Egypt hatched another plan to oppress the Israelites. What is that? Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. So among the Israelites were also called Hebrews. So among the midwives who were in charge of birthing children in the group of Israelites, he called them, and he gave them instructions. Two of those Hebrew midwives were called Shiphrah and Puah. And he said to them, when you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew women, when you make sure that they're giving birth, and you see that it is a son, then you shall kill him. So there were instructions from the king to the midwives saying, you shall kill these sons that are going to be born. So no son will be born. So when there's no son born, so how will the children be born? How will more children be born? No children will be born again. So, and if it is a daughter, then she shall live. So the girls could live, but the boys were supposed to be killed by the midwives. But the midwives feared God. Thank God for people who fear God. So they feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them. How brave of them that they should disobey the commandment of the king. And yet they were not sentenced to death. How did they manage that? So apparently believing in God doesn't just make you brave, doesn't just make you like a lion, bold. It also makes you wise. It also makes you clever. so that you don't have to face the punishment that is supposed to be given to you because you disobeyed the king. So what they did was they disobeyed the king and saved the male children and kept them alive. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this thing and saved the male children alive? Why didn't you obey my orders?" So the midwives said to the Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. It is like as though they don't even need us. They're not like your Egyptian women who are very delicate and they need the help of a midwife to give birth. These Hebrew women are very strong. They're very lively. And even before we get to their homes, they've already given birth. So how can we kill the children? How can we kill the male children?" Therefore, because they did this, therefore God dealt well with the midwives. So God is never ever behind or on the back foot. You can't catch God on the back foot. It's not that, oh, I never foresaw that. Oh, now this person is being faithful to me. Oh, now I should bless her or bless him. No, no. He is never caught on the back foot. He knows the fact that this is going to happen and they will be in a perfect place to receive a blessing. So therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mighty. And so it was because the midwives feared God that he provided households for them. So their families became good, their families became fruitful, their families became big. So then they got provision from God, and they got houses for themselves. So it was like they became prosperous, all because they feared God. They didn't want to do things which was against his will. In fact, this is a indictment against all those people who believe children are not human. Children are less than human, that fetuses are not human. This is an indictment against that. How many of us, you know, take recourse to the practice of abortion because why? Because we are too conscious about something, about the women are too conscious about their figures, they are too old, they are too young, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, the kind of excuses we find not to have babies. Right? But then babies, once you have done the act, babies are the result. So why blame the babies? So why not bring them into the world? Because that is what is the result of God's blessing. Yeah. It's like it's the process of making a baby is so precious in the eyes of God. And that process results in a baby, a new life who looks just like you. How precious is that? It is the same way of having God, you know, if we call ourselves the children of God, imagine what would happen to us if God said, okay, I have taken you, adopted you into my kingdom, but suddenly you are not doing the things that I do. So I don't want you anymore. I'm going to abort you. I'm going to kill you right now. How will that make you feel? How do you think children would feel if they knew that their parents didn't want them in this world? The faster we believe that children are a blessing from God and that they are made in His nature, the better it will be for us, that we ourselves um, can be can become wise, just like the midwives became wise because they feared God. Elsewhere in the Bible it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Otherwise, do you think these midwives would have been wise enough to face Pharaoh and tell him that there's no way they could kill the children? Who do you think gave them that wisdom? And where do you think that wisdom originated from? It originated from the fear of God. If you have the fear of God, then your wisdom will take you through thick and thin. It will help you cross mountains and rivers. And what difficulty are you facing? Nothing will be difficult for you, because God's wisdom is what's going to take you through all of it. All right. So next, so Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, now that he couldn't depend on the midwives, he had to find some other way. So he set every Jewish person's neighbor on alert. So they were supposed to listen for crying babies. So if they heard a crying baby in a Jewish household, they had the right to get into that house and find out if the baby was a male or a female. If it was a male, they were supposed to cast that child into the river and drown the child, whereas the girl would be allowed to live. You find that in verse 22 of the first chapter of Exodus. So now it was like, first it was two people who were sent by Pharaoh to kill the babies. Now, because they weren't doing what he wanted them to do, now the whole nation was against, the whole nation of Egypt was against the nation of Israel and against their children. So when the enemy realizes that his plans were for you to be poor, his plans for you to, to be in lack have been thwarted, that the fact that you have started to listen to God and have started to pay attention to what he says and to give where he asks you to give, when he sees you doing that and he sees God's blessing you, he will send more trouble your way. He thinks that it is going to change you from your set path. Will it? You are the person who can make that decision. The only way you can make it is by the grace of God. You can take the grace of God as your power, as the as the boost that you need to continue to keep to the path of giving and sowing into the kingdom of God, into people, into the people who are poor around you, who God has sent in your path, so that you can give to them and become, become recipients of God's grace. And recipients of God's grace in financial form, not just in spiritual form or in kind, but in financial form. That's how you will get your reward. Because what you sow, that you will reap. If you sow apples, you don't get grapes. If you sow money, you won't get joy, which is of another kind of seed. You want joy, sow joy. You want money, sow money. You want relationships, sow relationships. Sow into relationships. Sow love, peace, and joy into relationships. You will get relationships. Whatever you sow, that you will reap. Because God is not going to be deceived. God is not going to be mocked by our shenanigans, by our stupidities. Nor is he going to be mocked by the enemy's lies. He's not going to be mocked. He's not going to allow anybody to turn around and tell him that his word is not working. He won't allow that. He will make sure that your seed will bear fruit. If your seed is money, if your giving is in money, you will get returns in money terms. So let's see what happens to the personality that we were talking about. So we are going to chapter 2 of Exodus and the first verse. And a man of the house of Levi, this is a family in Israel, in the nation of Israel. The family name is Levi, because Levi was one of the sons of Jacob. So the whole family got the name of the son, name of Levi. So, and a man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So in the same clan, he chose a wife for himself. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, important to pay attention. All children are beautiful. So when they say he was a beautiful child, there must have been something more extraordinary about this child. So when she saw that, she hid him 3 months. I can't understand how you can hide a child who's 3 months old without the child making a noise. Doesn't it seem impossible to you? And at the same time, isn't our God as a God of the impossible? Whatever is impossible to man, that he makes possible. So my take on this is, if she was able to hide him for 3 months, it must have been the grace of God that he didn't gurgle, he didn't cry, and she was able to make sure that he was his needs were taken care of at all the right times, so that he never cried. The child never cried. I mean, that I think is a good description of a beautiful child. A child which doesn't cry and make the lives of parents anxious is a amazing child, as you know, in terms of having the characteristic of being such a happy, pleasant personality from babyhood. So that is what this child was like. But when she could no longer hide him, so the child grew. After 3 months, it was bigger, so she can't hide him really anywhere. So she took an ark of bulrushes. So she made a basket. Ark means a basket which is able to float. All right, an ark of bulrushes for him, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, made sure that it became waterproof. She put layers of this material, asphalt and pitch, and put the child in it and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. So she set it into the river to sail wherever it was going to sail to. And his sister, who stood afar off to know what would be done to him, saw all this. So she saw that her mother did this, and she didn't leave. Her mother left, but the sister didn't leave. She followed the ark. She followed the basket. At that time, the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. The princess came down to the river to bathe, and her maidens, so her staff, were also there with her. They were walking along the riverside. They were not bathing with her, they were walking along the riverside. I suppose they were guarding her or something like that. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she saw the basket among the reeds are grasses, river grasses. When she saw that, she sent her maid to fetch it, to get it. So, and when she opened the basket, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So when the child saw another human being, that's when the baby wept. Till that time, the baby was quiet. I tell you, what an amazing disposition the child had, that he was so quiet. But when he saw the woman, he wept. So she had compassion on him. It was like I'm sure it was like clockwork. The Lord said, now is the time to cry. Baby, you will cry now. Otherwise, the princess's heart is not going to melt. So the baby cried. Immediately, she had compassion on him. And she said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. So she immediately realized how the baby came to be in the basket and how the basket came to be in the river. So she realized that some of the Hebrews must have been trying to save this baby. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, so you remember the baby's sister was following the baby. So she said to the princess, shall I go and call a nurse for you from among the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? So apparently the baby needed mother's milk, and it was not the princess's child. So the princess couldn't feed the baby, nurse the baby. So good thinking there, wise thinking of the sister. So she offers the princess to bring a Hebrew woman who has had a baby, so that she can nurse this baby also along with her other babies. And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, yes, go, do that. So the little girl, the maiden, went and called the child's mother. If that is not in your face kind of move by God against the Egyptians, then I don't know what is. It's like, you try to kill the babies that I'm giving my people. I'm going to make sure that you will be giving your permission to the particular baby that I have chosen, and that baby is going to be your downfall, and you are going to make sure that you will feed your own downfall. It was that kind of a situation. So you must be wondering, so was this child the downfall of the Egyptian nation? Yeah, in a while we'll find out, but not today. So uh, the little girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away." So now the mother has permission from the princess herself. "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. Whatever you will charge to feed this child, I'll give it to you. But go and nurse the child." So the child needs to be nursed until it becomes a certain age. That's what they did. So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and after the child was grown up, she brought him back to the princess, to the Pharaoh's daughter, and he became the princess's son. So the princess called him Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." That is possibly the name, what the name Moses means, that I drew you out of the water. So that child was called Moses. Okay. Now that the child is in the palace, in the Egyptian king's palace, because the princess is his daughter, right? So what happens once he becomes part of the king's household? He becomes the most famous person in all of Egypt. So later on, you will see another person talks to Moses and says, "You are a prince, and you are a prince. What are you doing here?" So it's like he led the life of a prince. So as a prince, he had the access to the best of education, the best of military training, the best of, what should I call it? The best of missions that he could go to and accomplish. So he was a very well-known prince of Egypt. In fact, there are movies made on the character of Moses. He is called the Prince of Egypt. Then there's another movie called The Ten Commandments, where you will see that he was a very well-known personality in the kingdom of Egypt till the time he decides to change allegiance. So that is our story to look at radical giving. If it wasn't for God, if it wasn't for people who feared God, if it wasn't for people who trusted him at at the cost of their own lives. The two midwives, they loved God, they feared God at the cost of their own lives. The parents who were the biological parents of Moses, they hid him at the cost of their own lives. I'm sure if you hid a son, they weren't going to be treated kindly by the king. They would be murdered themselves. So it didn't matter to them that that could be their plight. They just hid Moses. And then imagine the wisdom of the sister, of the mother, to put the child in a basket and let him into God's hands. So they were actually sowing Moses into God's hands. And Moses and the Lord gives him back to them to take care of until he's a little older, and make sure that they're protected. They're protected because now the princess of Egypt is the mother of the child, no longer an Egyptian woman. She's the mother of that Hebrew baby. They're protected by her authority. They're protected from all kinds of neighbors, Egyptian neighbors. Nobody can touch that child now. They have all the provision that they need to bring up the child now that he is going to be nursed by his own mother. So because they sowed, because they were faithful, did not kill the child, and sowed him back and handed him back to God and said, "You take care of this child that you've given to me. I can't take care of him anymore. If he lives with me, he is going to die. So I don't want to be in charge of something that I can't handle. So I'm giving it up to you." So in a way, they sowed Moses and considered him probably dead, because whoever was going to discover him was going to say, "This is a Hebrew baby. This Hebrew baby has no right to live here in Egypt. So let's drown him." But that's not what happened, because God took care. God took care of him. And whatever you sow into the hands of God is taken care of by God. And He's the one who gives it increase. He's the one who makes sure that it bears fruit and gives you a harvest. They got a harvest. Not only did they get their son back, they also got provision back. Provision to take care of the child. I'm sure they were not poor then, once the princess made sure that they were taken care of. So, what more do you want? You can be at the lowest point in your life. You can be at a point when enemies are trying to kill you. But trust yourself to God, and you will see the Lord God who gave up his own son on the cross and gave his Holy Spirit to live in us and raised his son from the dead so that he could give us his Holy Spirit. How much more will he not take care of what you sow into him, what you give to him, what you entrust to him? Whatever you entrust to him will not see death, it will see life, it will see resurrection life. In a way, Moses was resurrected back from the waters and he was given back to his mother. So that is it for today's radical giving teaching, and I am glad you've stayed with me all the way through till this point. And I hope you are blessed by what you heard, and I hope you feel confident about sowing into his kingdom, about giving to the people he asks you to give to, and the giving to the poor. I hope you are confident about that, because whatever you sow, that will reap a harvest. Remember that. And if you feel good about, if you feel led, and if you feel that the Lord is talking to you about giving to this channel, please feel free to give. And the way to give is via PayTM or PhonePe to the number 93554 And when you give, I will send you a free ebook as my appreciation for your gift of any size. So all you need to do is write to me at stkogchannel2020@gmail.com, and I will send you a free ebook as a gift. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.